We are back from the weekend of this Arizona heat to talk some Arizona Coyotes players. Today we got Shayne Gostisbehere on our player review of Locked On Coyotes.
You're Locked On Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is Locked On Coyotes, your number one daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes. I'm Robyn Leonio. That's Carl Pavlik right beside me. On this Monday, it is May 16th. Hope you guys are later today. Go enjoy your free Chipotle. That apparently is happening. I know I will.
I saw that.
But we're going to talk some player reviews today. Before we get into that, I want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I also want to thank everyone for making Locked On Coyotes your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, which means no paywall ever. But let's get into the meat of today's episode, Carl. We are talking player reviews continued. We got defenseman Shayne Gostisbehere, acquired over the last offseason via a trade that the Coyotes didn't give anything up to get.
Yep.
And ends up being a massive highlight to the Arizona Coyotes season.
Absolutely. Definitely a really good player early on, an early sign that the Coyotes were maybe making the right moves. I think when the season first started, Gostisbehere performing well was like a real shot in the arm that the team needed. And just looking at what they gave up or didn't have to give up to get him and what Philadelphia did with that space, it just makes it all the better.
I know, right? Philadelphia, and they figured it's we can just unload them. We'll be able to afford more players and whatever. And then they ended up finishing with the 4th overall pick in the upcoming draft, or 5th overall pick in the upcoming draft.
Yeah, and Ghost turned into a really good defenseman again. He had, there was a reason he was traded. He was at a low point in his career. He turned around, finished with 14 goals, 37 assists. That is his second highest goals in a season, behind 17 his first year. Looks like his second highest points. He had 52 or second highest assists. He had 52 in 2017-2018, which is pretty good.
So pretty darn close to his most points, 51 to 65, and that was that same year.
Yeah.
And the reason why that they got rid of Gostisbehere, that's what the Philadelphia got rid of him. If you look at the last 2 years, 12 and 20 points combined, on both of those,
shortened seasons, admittedly, but still,
he was not good.
Yeah, he did look like he was trending up this past season, which is why I think a lot of people were surprised that Philadelphia decided to make that call in the trade. Although I guess, in their minds, this is going to be the highest his value is ever going to be. And he was the type of player that the Coyotes needed, the player who knew hey, I have something to prove and I'm going to do it. And I cannot think of a better player, maybe Clayton Keller, but Gostisbehere is definitely one of those players who was at the very top of that mindset.
Yeah, we talked about those players. We'll talk about just the Coyotes in general, right? How everyone has something to prove from the Coyotes this last season. Gostisbehere was definitely one of those. Keller was one of those. And again, we talked back to Strawman, at the beginning of
Strawman.
Strawman was another one of those. Those are some major players who came out to prove and impressed. And I think even when Gostisbehere slowed down on on the point scoring, he still did his job as a defenseman.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're going to be talking about Jacob Chikrin, and his season was just, not ideal. But one of the things that, the reason for that was he was doing the hard work. So Gostisbehere was getting some of the easier ice, especially early on in the season. That changed when Chikrin was hurt. But that did kind of allow him to, capitalize. And, that's not a knock against him. You need players like that who can do that, who can like go on the ice and score because they're getting like the good matchup. They're getting the offensive zone times. Like that is, great that he was able to produce in those situations.
And I think we saw that part coming too, right? We're like, at least not entire, like not at this extent, but you and I, when we were talking about the acquisition of Ghostbear, we were just kind of like, it's like, yeah, we can definitely see him slot in as a solid second pair defenseman, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe the change of scenery might help improve his, might help him bounce back. We didn't think it'd get to this level, 51 points, but I mean, like, we kind of did see it coming.
Yeah, yeah. It was, it was very clear that it was the ideal situation for him. Like there was still absolutely a chance that like something else could have come up, or he whiffed on it, but he didn't. He came in with something to prove, to a perfect situation, to ideal ice time, and he knocked it out of the park. Like good on him. Like definitely things that he could do better that we're going to be talking about. But he had a really solid season.
Yeah, that's again what you want to see, right? It's what you want to see from a player who has something to prove, especially on a rebuilding team.
Yep.
Um, and it makes it those bright spots, right? Because you're like, especially we knew the Coyotes team was going to be bad, so we're just like, what's a couple things we can look forward to? And like I was hoping Ghost Bear would be one, and he was. So I'm glad.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad we got a chance to see that, and I'm glad we got a chance to see the fact that a change of scenery, just a simple change in scenery, really helped him boost his confidence back.
Absolutely. And, it's something that we always talk about, but very rarely do we get to see like that kind of turnaround, especially when that change of scenery is to the Coyotes. Like
Hmm.
we see it the other way all the time, but not necessarily when it's changing scenery to the Coyotes.
Yeah, usually we're just like, oh man, like Dylan Strom, he's just not cutting it out here in Arizona. Maybe just a change of scenery might help, and then like almost instant, like the first couple games that he goes back to Chicago and he has a great. I'm just like, see, that's all he needed, and
Yep.
then that's how it goes. That's so it's not. It was nice to see the other way around this time.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that just goes to show like Bill Armstrong is smart in who he's acquiring.
Bill Armstrong, yeah, like his acquisitions has been amazing. Obviously, we're gonna have a whole episode on Bill Armstrong's freaking acquisitions,
Yeah.
but that's much later in this off season, maybe about a week or two from now. But
There's going to be a lot to go over because he is not afraid to make a move.
and again, as I mentioned this last week. There's a reason why I like to call him Bargain Bill.
Yeah. And I do kind of wonder because, you often hear like, yeah, players maybe, first year, no one really knows what's going on. Second year, like you kind of know. I feel like that's going to be with Bill Armstrong. Teams are going to be like, all right, who you want to take off me? Why?
Yeah, they're eventually teams will catch on, and again, we're
Yeah.
going to talk about that later in the off season. But like, let's just say teams are going to eventually catch on, and it's going to catch up. But it's okay. We're good for now. We are
Hmm.
good for now. But those are some of the highlights. We're going to in a little bit. We are going to get to some things we hoped that we can see some improvements. Before we get to any of that, though, I want to let you guys know about our partners at BetOnline that continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures And of course, let's not forget the Stanley Cup playoffs. The second round the second round is just about to start. The first round had just concluded after a crazy Game 7 weekend. You can get more bets on there. And BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks again, everyone, for making Locked On Coyotes your first listen every day. Once again, I want to let you guys after this episode to turn to Locked On Now. They got nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. But let's go back on here on Locked On Coyotes as we go ahead and discuss Shayne Gostisbehere, Ghost Bear, as we like to call him. We talked about highlights, Carl, things we wanted to see more from him. What do you have?
So he, Gostisbehere, did kind of disappear for a couple stretches throughout the season. I think especially when he was doing some of the harder work, which is to be expected, but it was a trend. He had a phenomenal end to the month of April. He had a 3-assist night against the Minnesota Wild. He had 6 points in 3 games. But prior to that, the entire month, he had only had a goal and 2 assists. And I just want more consistency from him. I want you can't have that disappearance, especially from one of your veteran guys.
Yeah, consistency. That is one of the biggest things you'll talk about for a lot of Coyotes players. Because let's be frank, that was a major problem for the entire team.
Yep.
It makes sense for a rebuilding team, right? You're going to have there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that go. But like you said, you have a veteran like Shayne Gostisbehere, and yeah, it's his first year with the Coyotes, but it's still not his first rodeo, working through, in the NHL. So he's got to know he's got to be able to stay consistent with his own play, even if the team
definitely
around him isn't.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think every player knows that if they mess up, someone's going to have to cover for them. And unfortunately for the Coyotes, especially for players, the people who were covering for Gostisbehere, more often than not, they were rookies and
very inexperienced.
And that's just one of those things where that's a tough situation to be in, and that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. But it is something where I would like to see that more improved on. I would like to see his game continue to evolve. I think last season kind of showed that he still has plenty to give an NHL team. So he can still improve his game.
And he's, he's still technically in his prime, in the later 20s. He's 29, so he's towards the end of the prime, but still he's got years left.
Yeah.
To continue to improve.
And this type of defenseman can last pretty long. I do think that they start to lose their efficiency. They start to lose their offensive flair, but they're able to continue to play the game and provide a lot of contributions. And I think veteran presence is going to be something that Gostisbehere can potentially provide. He has been on some bad teams, and I think that's going to be kind of a good thing for him to be able to put things in perspective. And just the fact that he has seemingly turned his career around, that's to be admired.
Yeah, and I think that's that's the thing is despite the fact that he had those consistency problems and he played on a bunch of bad teams, we're still watching him grow, right? And I think that's the best part is that whatever he takes, whatever Coach Tourné tells him, he will still continue to improve on whatever Bear tells him to.
Yeah. And I mean, he's going to get a new coach focused on defense. Hopefully that'll be something that, he can adapt to. He's a big part of the Coyotes defensive squad. So like, hopefully they bring in someone who's able to kind of, make him flourish. Because I do think when you're, interviewing your assistant coaches, like that's going to be like a thing. Like, what do you think you would be doing with Shayne Gostisbehere? What do you think you're going to be doing with Chikrin? Like, what do you think you're going to be doing with all of the young players?
Yeah, and that's the question any coach and general manager has to go through during an off season for a rebuilding team.
Mm-hmm.
And you want players to grow, but you also want to make sure it's still in the direction that you want the team to go. Like a player can still grow, but it can be a whole different. Like you're great, but this team is also this style or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think Ghostberry has fit in pretty well, regardless.
I think so too. I think so. I think he is like, going forward, I thought that he would be just a piece, but mostly a cap dump. And he turned himself into like a standout piece by the Coyotes. We'll talk about it more in the next segment, but like, it's one of those things where I'm like, does he have value now? Are they going to flip him and get like more assets? Or, the other end of it, do you keep that player because you're like, oh, this guy could probably stay with the team for a while. He revitalized his career here. That's going to be important.
Those are questions that you definitely have to ask, and questions that we might ask in just a second, unless you have any more things you want to improve on. So let's go ahead and get to that in just a moment. But first, a quick word from Carl.
So I want you to imagine dipping your fingers into a plastic tub of birthday cake frosting, and then open your eyes and realize that it was only 150 calories and it has 16 grams of protein. That's what it's like when you eat a birthday cake puff from Built. I just received my birthday cake puffs, and I have never had anything like them before. They were really good. It is Arizona, so I will say definitely keep it, cooler or in your fridge. It's kind of melty, but really good. And it was only 150 calories, 16 grams of protein in there, and only 9 grams of sugar. I really do not like to eat a lot of sugar, so it was nice to only have like 9 grams in that snack. And it's covered in 100% real chocolate. White chocolate, so it's a good fit with the birthday cake flavors. What I want you to do is go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com, and get yourself some birthday cake puffs now.
So let's continue this conversation on Shayne Gostisbehere on Locked On Coyotes. I'm Robyn Leano of Carl Pavlock. Talk about grades. Let's get into a grade first, and then we'll talk about his future. What do you got? I'm trying to think. I'm still in my head.
So it's a hard one because he is definitely a player who I think could have done more, but he exceeded my expectations in so many ways. He had a strong start, kind of a weak finish up until the very end, which I love that. I love that he didn't go down fighting. I am going to go a B plus for Gostisbehere.
I was thinking around the B to B plus range as well, and I was gonna go ahead and count in the inconsistencies, and but also take into it, taking into mind that he had that amazing start. That in the first month, 2 months of the season, he was, I believe, like the Coyotes' leading point scorer, like. Which was obviously, as a team, when you have a defenseman doing that, it's not great. But the whole
outside of Oliver Ekman-Larsson when he was doing that, that was fun.
Exactly. But so he took care of the team when they struggled the most. But I think when the team around built up, and he kind of fell flat. I think that's what kind of, is taking it back. And it's like he didn't progress with the team, even though he still, again, exceeded expectations. He had a phenomenal season regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm roughly in that area, the B to B plus.
Yeah. Which one you gonna go with?
Ooh, how about like that? Where it's a percentage wise, where it's like a B, but technically like the 0.49% where it's like right there before the B plus.
So that'd be what, like an 86.5%?
86.49%.
Well, that'd be between a B minus and a B.
What? No.
Ace. Oh,
80, no, because 80,
oh,
82.49 would be between.
okay.
Yeah.
Very
Nah.
way to complicate our rating. Thank you,
I,
Robyn.
I just did that just to joke
Yeah,
with people's Mondays. It's Monday.
it is Monday. Yes. But I do think that he did come a long way. Definitely a very interesting player to kind of grade because, I mean, especially I think when we look at the players we've graded so far, Schmaltz had a good end to the season. Keller had a great middle third before being hurt, and that kind of defined his career
Mhm.
or season. Sorry. But Gostisbehere started strong and then kind of petered out, which is definitely
And
kind of new.
it's not that he didn't play bad. It's just he disappeared.
Yeah. And if you are the type of person who acknowledges plus minus, again, not an ideal stat. He finished minus 23, which not good for a defenseman.
No, I mean he is an offensive defenseman, but still,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah. But definitely areas to grow. But I do think that we both think that he has a career with the Coyotes. Or do you think that the team looks to shop him?
this is where it gets complicated because I was thinking about this all day, every day over the weekend, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Gostisbehere now has some value that he bounced back. The Coyotes are going through a rebuild. I had to think if there's different ways, there's different schools of thought in this. Is like you can trade him, but then you're losing a defenseman, in which the
Mm-hmm.
Coyotes do not have enough of. But you are, potentially getting more draft picks in the upcoming draft of a player that you already got for free.
Yeah,
So like you essentially like you'd be winning either way in that case.
which was
And
basically the logic of trading Wedgwood.
exactly. So in this case, it's like okay, so like you can take care of like he found his footing. He got his groove back. Maybe he can do it with another team. But on the other school of thought is he was so happy that he found his groove with Arizona. At least finished out his contract here until he finds something next year. I think that is more where I'm leaning towards. At least play one more year of Arizona.
Yeah, which I mean, we can definitely talk about it depending on how the offseason goes. But like the potential of trading him at the deadline, I think could be
That's a
a
very
good spot.
that's a very high prospect, especially if he like replicates like his start as last season. If he does
Yeah,
that again, then his stock will only improve. And going into the next draft, which is obviously I'm not sure how deep it is. I haven't checked out the prospects of the next draft, but if the Coyotes really want to tank hard for Bedard, maybe not have Gostisbehere on their team.
yeah. Um, Yeah, especially because he did come in strong at the very end. Gostisbehere only has 1 year left on his contract, which is 4.5 mil. So not horrible. That should be kind of movable. I do think it all kind of depends. Sure, you are ideally going to get Timmins back next year, but that's still a very young blue line. If the team moves Chikrin, I don't think they move Gostisbehere, just because I think they would want to keep someone there.
That is a very
But
good point.
I do also think that if the Coyotes start acquiring veteran defensemen, who aren't horrible, who they could like trust to play like those minutes, then maybe we see Ghost on the move. It all kind of depends on what they're able to restock before next year.
So it could very well be like an either or Chikrin or a Gostisbehere thing. I can see that,
Yeah.
especially it's seeing who gets the better value return, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the most important part to Arizona right now is what kind of return can we get for a certain player, and is it worth trading this player for that return? If you can get like a couple second rounders, and heck, even if get back into the first round again, like that's plus like blue chip prospects, you're already good.
Yeah. I think it's far more likely that the Coyotes end up trading Gostisbehere at the deadline. And then, hey, maybe he's one of those players who comes back and resigns because he did have, a good time in the desert and he wants to finish out his career there. But I mean, he's never won a cup, so he probably wants to chase one of those too.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Like that I agree with you on that. Like you might
Yeah.
want to go cup chasing. So, won't maybe not trade it this offseason, but at the deadline, could very well be likely to a Stanley Cup team, maybe.
I mean, hopefully, like usually they're the ones looking, like the contenders.
They're the ones that are buying, yeah. Unless like the New Jersey Devils decide to freaking do some stuff.
Just be crazy at the offseason. I mean, it's
I mean, that
hockey.
happens all the time with New Jersey. I mean, obviously we're not a New Jersey podcast, but like, oh my god, like how many times have they gotten top 5 and just still are bad? So
Yeah, fair point. I don't think they've ever gone out to acquire a player like Gostisbehere, though. That would be quite the move. If any team, though, I could see New Jersey trying that.
yeah, we'll see what happens with that. It'll be funny. Anyways, though, I think that's it for today's episode. We don't have anything else going. But hope you guys liked this episode, I guess. If you did, don't forget to leave a review, like, comment, subscribe if you have yet to already. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. If you don't forget to interact with us on social media, we're on Facebook, facebook.com/LockedOnCoyotes, on Instagram at LockedOnCoyotes, and on Twitter at LO_Coyotes. I am personally at Robyn_Leano. You can see that spelled if you're watching on YouTube, ROBYN_LEANO. Carl Pavlock is Carl Pavlock FFH. Interact with us, ask the question you might have, or we can answer them right back or on a future episode of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. And we got more. We got more player reviews coming out through this week, and we're even potentially going to start some draft profiles to get you guys ready for the 2022 NHL entry draft, because the Coyotes got 3 picks in the first round. We're going to talk about that all coming up. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy and cool. It's getting hot out there. And don't forget to howl on.